Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. God, you who are greater than anything that we can ever imagine, have called us together here in this place to share with each other, to grow with each other, to learn with each other, to be more bound and knit together as your people, doing the work that is for justice and for change. And we thank you. We thank you for the opportunity to be of service to your kingdom and to be a part of your kingdom. We ask that you bless this moment, bless this time that we will have together, and help it to be a moment to infuse us and prepare us for the work yet ahead in this year and beyond. Help us to be stronger together than we are apart, and help us to recognize that we can do more together than we can do by ourselves. We thank you, God, for your loving kindness and your mercy towards us. Help us to always remember to live in love and to let love live in us, through us, around us, and as us. Amen and Ashe.
Thank you for that opening prayer, Minister Daryl Moak, the pastor of UCC of Fredericksburg and the chair of the Justice and Witness Committee of the Potomac Association. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's first session of the Justice and Witness Action Network 2024 Organizing and Strategy Retreat, themed The Power of Many. And as you heard in Reverend Moak's prayer, we believe that we could do more together than we can by ourselves. And tonight and tomorrow, we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on that theme and the work that we hope to do together. Tonight's agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to start out with a brief overview of the Justice and Witness Action Network. So for some of you, this will be a review. For others, this may be your first time getting up to speed on who we say we are, how we are organized, and the work that we hope to do moving forward. We'll have an opportunity to engage in some training led by Bishop Dwayne Royster, where we're going to be leaning upon last year's 2020 rather's training session, where he took us through the importance of one-on-ones as a foundation to community organizing work. So again, for some of you, that will be a review, and for others, it may be your first time. But the importance is that work is needed for all of us. And no matter how seasoned we are in the work of justice, engaging in that training is always useful. And then we'll close out our time by hearing from several of our issue-based networks who will take the time to then focus on sharing some updates around the work that they have been doing and the work that we hope to do in 2024. So for those who are just joining, I want to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. Give us your name, your local church, association, and one justice issue that you are very passionate about, if you can list that. So let us begin our time together. Let me share my screen. So in the United Church of Christ, and we believe the same in the Central Atlantic Conference, that we are the Justice Church. And back in 2015, we began to pose an important question in regards to our work moving forward. And that question was, how do we measure up to the historic witness of the UCC today, both as the denomination as a whole, but also as a conference? We wanted to know whether or not that was true. And part of that questioning led us to some reviewing of the work that we had been doing prior to 2015. When the network was launched back in 2019, the primary way in which we did the work of justice was by drafting resolutions. And many of you are familiar with our resolution process within the United Church of Christ. And then we also learned and found out that we have many clergy and justice leaders across the church, as well as local churches, who are committed to and have trained themselves, have the knowledge and the skills and the capacity to engage in the work of justice. And we're actively engaged in that work. and believed that we were called as the church to do the work of justice. And then we had those who were on the opposite end of the sort of spectrum of the work of justice, those who were still learning and getting an understanding of who we are as a people of faith, and some who felt like that politics did not belong in the church. But we recognize that through those political opposites, that there was an opportunity to still to do a great work. And we wanted to recognize the work that was already happening within the conference, as well as see where there may be opportunities for us to build greater strength in our work, build greater unity, because for all of the great work that was happening across the Central Atlantic Conference, we recognize that many of us were in isolation. We were not doing the work of justice together to increase our capacity and to bring us closer together, to increase our power, our ability to have impact around particular issues. So we spent some time trying to chart a new way forward, developing a vision and a mission on what it would look like if we saw ourselves as one unit, as one justice organization. Although we are individuals in our own right in terms of individual people of faith, individual churches, associations, the reality is we are the church. We are the United Church of Christ in this region of the country. And we would be better served if we focused on maximizing the gifts that were present across the conference and trying to be much more effective in our work of justice. So with that, we put forth this vision and mission as part of launching the network back in 2019 at the conference annual meeting. We were excited at that particular time because it gave us the opportunity to sort of begin to lay the groundwork for the work that we would hope to do moving forward coming out of that meeting. Our work is not just grounded in a vision and mission, it's also grounded in who we are as a people of faith and what we believe that we are guided by in terms of principles that are biblical and theological in nature. But this also helps to shape our identity as a justice and witness action network. So we want to be theologically and biblically grounded. We want to be self-determined, defining our own agenda and setting our priorities based upon our historic witness and the needs of the people and based upon a real power analysis of where we may have the ability to have what I like to say a transformative impact and the ability to create lasting change. Some other of our guiding principles that helps to define our work and gives us identity is community organizing. Doing this work in relationship and partnership with people of faith towards a common vision for justice and community. And also to do that from the guiding principle of engaging in prophetic witness and action, boldly speaking truth to power, engaging in action that holds that power accountable. We wanted to embrace the arts in the context of the gifts that were present across the conference. So what does it mean to embrace music and arts? We believe that music and arts sort of helps us to build community, helps us to share our story, preserves our story, as well as helps to lead the way in regards to the work that we hope to do. We wanted to be strategy oriented in our work. And we wanted to recognize the fact that no one organization can do the work of justice alone. So we must do this work in coalition and in partnership with other like-minded organizations who are interested in doing the work of justice. So these are the elements of our work, and many of you have already engaged in this work with us as a network. Many of you engage in this work off on your own in other ways. We engage in civic engagement, or another way to say that is voter engagement, public policy advocacy, power building, community organizing, and prophetic witness and action. This is our structure, and we're continuing to build our structure, but we are happy that we have state and regional action networks. Gives us the ability to be strategic in our advocacy work, particularly our public policy and legislative advocacy work, to really bring together both UCC justice leaders and clergy who live in these regions for opportunities for organizing and mobilizing around a set of priorities. And a lot of this work has been going on effectively in Virginia and in Washington, D.C. over the last 3.5 years. We're also organized by issue, and we recognize that people are passionate about issues, and they come to issues out of either a personal experience or a story that has touched them and moved them to be passionate about that particular issue. But the issue that we all really should be passionate about is justice. So no matter what issue you're really passionate about and have spent a lot of time working on, we hope that you will understand and recognize that we're all called to do the work of justice, no matter what that injustice may be. But these are some of the issue-based networks that have already been organized within our network structure, as well as others that are emerging and others that we hoped would be organized based upon what we have learned from many conversations about the work that's happening across the conference. So we have a very active racial justice network. Our Faith and Democracy campaign, which you'll learn more about, is really the heart and soul of our Voting Rights Advancement and Democracy Network. We have an emerging environmental and climate justice network based upon work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. We have a whole host of open and affirming congregations across the entire congregations, and many of them engage in Pride Month, in the month of June, as well as engage in other activities. And we're hoping that we can do more organized work and bring those leaders together to be more organized and do work together. We have a Palestine and Israel network, which you will hear a little bit more from this evening. And we have many churches across the DMV region that are engaged in the Congregational Action Network, which is a nonprofit justice network that engages in sanctuary and helping those who are here in the country through immigration. So talk a little bit about power. Where does our power come from as in order to do this work? Our power comes from, we believe, it's from our covenant relationship first with God, with Christ, and with the Holy Spirit, our faith, essentially. And each one of us as people of faith being called to do this particular work and doing this work in relationship with one another as people of faith, but also with those who are impacted. And many of us can recall or call upon those scriptures that really speak to this and the importance of people of faith being in relationship with impacted people. And in some way, we're all impacted by injustice. Our power also, I believe, also comes through us living into our identity as a network, as a united and a uniting justice movement working together as the United Church of Christ and as the Central Atlantic Conference. Again, yes, we are individuals in our right in terms of our individual local churches and our associations, but the reality is we are part of a larger whole. And our power comes through our vision, our mission, and our principles, and the belief in the fact that we can do more and have a greater impact working together than disconnected and being isolated from one another. We are one. So our power also comes in by way of taking action. And again, the word action is not by happenstance in terms of being a part of our name. We are a organization, a movement that wants to engage in action and engage other justice leaders, clergy, and local churches across our conference in action. Charitable work is justice work, but it is the starting point, I believe. As you all know, it meets just the immediate need, but we must go beyond that. A justice response is what is required to really address most, if not all, issues of injustice that we see in our local communities and we see throughout the world, seeking the root causes of suffering and injustice, analyzing and addressing those systemic factors and building our power in relationship with impacted people so that we can create change. And I like this quote from one of our own leaders, Reverend Tracy Blackman: "As silence in the face of injustice is never an acceptable response from people of faith. Biases is not the business of the church." So our justice work is never relegated to just proclamation and word only. We take action, and we do that action from who we are as a people of faith, who we are in relationship, not through a exclusive political lens, through the lens that we oftentimes do most of our political work in this country, i.e., whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat or independent, but as people of faith. So us in action, we are justice leaders. So justice leaders are individual members of local churches who believe we are called as people of faith to do the work of justice. And clergy, of course, those are our ordained ministers serving local churches or in other specialized ministry. And as of right now, in this new year, we are at 675 justice leaders and clergy strong on our Justice and Witness Action Network list, who have signed up to be a part of this justice movement, and that we want to continue to build relationships with and organize and invite their leadership to be a part of the growing work that we hope to do. Local churches, and you'll hear a little bit more about this tomorrow, local churches are our community of people of faith working together to live into God's vision of the beloved community. All three of these can sign up to be a part of the Justice and Witness Action Network. And in fact, if you RSVP for this event tonight, and this was your first time RSVPing or participating in anything related to the Justice Action Network, you are now signed up to the network. But for many of you, I know that you are already signed up to the network. And one of the ways in which we immediately like to engage you is we try to connect you with the organizing team of one of the state regional action networks where you live. And hopefully where you live is also where your church is located. So for instance, I'll use this as an example. So for our Justice and Witness Action Network, Virginia, we work closely with the organizing team to connect them with those Virginia justice leaders and clergy members who sign up to the network so they can build relationships with them, seek their wisdom and their leadership, and engage them in the work that's happening in Virginia. We also want to connect you with one of our issue-based networks that you saw there on the screen a little earlier. And we'll talk a little bit more about later in tonight about opportunities to organize new issue-based networks as we continue to grow and invite others to be a part of this movement. And then one area which we have worked effectively is connecting with the association-based committees who facilitates justice in that particular associations. And we have done a lot of work with the Potomac Association because they have a long-standing committee that is now called the Justice and Witness Committee, led by Reverend Daryl Moak. And he has a team of leaders working with him that help to facilitate those members of the Potomac Association in the work of the Justice and Witness Action Network. Again, local churches, we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. I won't spend a lot of time on this evening, but it's pretty much the same. Once we sign local churches up, we want to immediately be in relationship, build a relationship with them, have conversations with them, and begin to connect them and engage them in the work. So to try to provide those who need a visual for sort of how this really all looks and plays out, and again, we'll have an opportunity to, in a moment, to talk about the one-on-ones, but one-on-ones is an opportunity to build relationships with individuals who you already have some type of connection with. And through those one-on-ones, particularly one-on-ones we're hoping that you are having within your local church, you will have an opportunity to connect these individuals with your local church's committee, team, whatever that team or committee is called, that helps to facilitate the work of justice, engage the church in the work of justice around your local church's set priorities. And then from there, we're hoping that relationships then can be built across these local churches to engage in the work, come together with others who are already engaged in the state action networks to build your agenda and priorities together to be the United Church of Christ doing this work in your state, in your, in some cases also in your local communities, and then also connect you with those issue-based networks where you may have prioritized, for instance, racial justice. We can connect you with our leaders of our racial justice network to be engaged with the ongoing work that's happening through there. And then, of course, through time to time, we have campaigns and initiatives that help to facilitate that. Again, this is just another visual to help you sort of get an understanding of how this would all work out. Again, starting from the local church, connecting both our members of the network, clergy and justice leaders, again, to engage and be connected to in relationship with the state action networks, and then that work continuing to move forward through partnerships that our state action networks have with organizations in their state, as well as other clergy and justice leaders who are doing the work of justice. And again, we do that work through our campaigns and initiatives. And again, this is just another final way to look at that, just based upon the work happening primarily at the center through our issue-based networks. So this is who we are, and you'll have an opportunity to learn much more about who we are as we go throughout our session, first session tonight, but also our session tomorrow. But at this particular time, what I want to do is just stop and see if there are like 2 or 3 questions before we move on to our next agenda item, which is our training on building relationships. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments? All right. We're going to move to our next agenda item. Let me just share my screen just so you can get a view of the agenda for those who may not have it pulled up. So we're going to move into this section here. We're going to listen to the recording of the training done by Bishop Royster back in 2020 on one-on-ones. And as part of that, we will have a chance to review a role play. Then we're going to go into small groups for a short period of time. So you have an opportunity to do some role play of a one-on-one yourself, and then come back and get some report backs. And then we'll take a brief break and then continue with the rest of our agenda tonight. So let me cue up the video and get started for the next portion of our session this evening. And for those who just joined, thank you for joining tonight. We would like to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. Give us your name, local church, association, and one justice issue you are very passionate about.
So the next thing that we're going to talk about in our collective work together is the issue of building. Is the issue of one-to-ones and building relationships. So relationships are how we build our capital, right? This is how we build our capacity to, here we go, build our capacity to do our work, build our capacity to build power, right? Organized people plus organized money equals organized power. Again, organized people from organized plus organized money equals organized power. And the way that we build relationships with people, this foundational element is called doing a one-to-one. So a reminder, faith-based community organizing equips people with skills and capacity to effectively enter public life in order to negotiate their interests and values. And I think that's important for us to be reminded of all the time, that like this is a public relationship. And although we're going to be talking about one-to-ones here in a minute, and we'll be talking about one-to-ones that you do with another person, a lot of times the relationships that we're talking about building in those, it's not necessarily about building friendships or getting a best friend or something like that. This is about entering into a public relationship, a conversation about shared interest that could actually have the capacity to transform your community. It's a very intentional conversation. It's a very intentional meeting of the minds when you come together. So Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public. Dr. Cornel West, who's now at Union Seminary in New York City, used to be at Harvard and used to be at Princeton as well. And then Francis of Assisi says, preach the gospel every day, and if necessary, use words. And I think it's important for us to understand that even when we're building these relationships, even how we're showing up, how we're sitting, how we're talking, how we're engaging, speaks volumes about what we do. Power is the product of relationship. And we should be able to say that you can't move somebody if you're not in relationship with them, whether it's a public official, a corporation, a person sitting next to you in a pew. You've got to be in relationship with them somehow or another to move them. Relationships are ultimately about who do you love? Who are the people that you love that help you to dictate who you actually need to be in relationship with? We always say, when in doubt, do a one-to-one. If you're not sure about something, somebody says something, does something, whatever, you go back, have an intentional conversation with them. And the real way that we build power is to stay close to our people. Whenever we move away from each other, we move away from the base of people that we've built, we actually wind up hurting ourselves and hurting the community that we're really trying to impact. So I want to talk about conversations. So most conversations that we have with people, I refer to as top of the water iceberg conversations. And this image before you kind of shows this notion, right? So only 10% of an iceberg is above the water. 90% of an iceberg is below the water and you normally can't see it. Most of the time when we're engaging people in everyday life, just engaging in conversation with them, we're doing that 10% conversation. Hey, how's the family? How's the kids? How's work? How things at church? How is the ministry going? Things of that nature. Very generic questions that we all ask each other every day. We sit at coffee with one another, have these conversations, the coffee class that you have after church, right? They're not necessarily the most deep, meaningful conversations in the world. When we do a one-to-one conversation with somebody, our goal is actually to get down below the surface, to find out really what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's going on inside of them, right? We're really trying to ask some very pointed questions that hopefully we're asking questions and also sharing vulnerability that gives space for people to open up and share with us in a deeper way what their concerns are, what are the things that that they keep them up at night. It's one of the questions we're going to talk about. What keeps you up at night? Adam Kruger, who actually now works for National People's Action, used to work for Faith in Action, says your one-to-ones are a direct referendum on the amount of love you have for your community. So the number of one-to-ones that you do is a direct reflection on how much you actually care and love the people that you're in community with. If you don't want to talk to them, you probably don't love them very much. If you want to talk to them, find out what motivates them, what makes them tick, what keeps them up at night, what makes them have hopes and dreams for the future, then you're going to spend time dealing with one-to-ones and having heart-to-heart, deep conversations with them. If you're going to build a faith-based community organizing network, which is, I think, what Justice and Witness Action Network is trying to do, the one-to-one is the most critical organizing skill you have to master. You have to be a master doing it. And again, it's not just any old conversation. It's actually a very intentional conversation, very focused in on what you are talking and sharing and listening for in others. And I like to say one-to-ones are an organizer's superpower. Yes, I'm a Black nerd or a blurred, as we refer to ourselves. I'm really into the Marvel universe and superheroes and comic books because I grew up on all that stuff. And so superpowers become very important. And so having good quality one-to-ones are an organizer's superpower, right? Because it builds that emotional, mental fabric between people that gives you the strength to go into battle with one another and to be able to get victory. So one-to-ones build relationships, power, they build tension. We'll talk about that a little bit, leadership, build agency, build around scope of work, build results, build story, and they build team, right? All these things happen at one time or another in the course of building out a one-to-one relationship. Again, remember, we said the first revolution is internal. Sometimes you got to do a one-to-one with yourself. Ask yourself some of these questions so you have some answers and a story to talk about. But we want to make sure that people understand that these one-to-one conversations are looking to do some very definitive things, like some of the things that are listed here. And we should say, just so everybody, in case you might be trying to take notes, we're going to make these slides available to folks that you can go back through and look at them whenever you have the time and energy to do so. So there's more than one type of one-to-one. There's relational one-to-one, which we're actually going to talk about today, but there's a leadership one-to-one, a challenging one-to-one, a debriefing one-to-one, inspirational one-to-one, a testing ideas one-to-one, thinking with, or coaching and mentoring. And they all come at different times in different places. And, you know, they can be used for different things. For the purposes of what we're talking about right now, we're trying to build a relational one-to-one. Some of the other one-to-ones that we talked about, though, are more advanced, right? So you don't do the advanced ones without first having a set of relational one-to-ones that are building depth. And we want to say that, right? You can't have intention one-to-one with somebody if you don't first have a relationship with them, or agitational one-to-one with somebody when you don't first have a relationship with them. You need to build relationship and capacity to be able to talk about this. It goes back to Reverend Franklin's conversation earlier about white folk in this space, or men dealing with women in this space, right? Before you can actually have deeper conversations with folk that where you're pushing them, or, you know, trying to get them to see things a certain way, you've got to build some trust with them. And that happens over a series of relational one-to-ones where you're actually learning about them, they're learning about you, and you are growing together. So here's a couple of questions I like to ask when doing a one-to-one. And we should say a one-to-one should be no more than 30 to 45 minutes. You want to respect people's time when you do these, especially in the earlier stages. People want to know that you're going to come in, come back out, you're going to honor their time. But, you know, other than, you know, you do some of the preliminary questions and things, but you want to ask questions that really get below the surface, that make people stop and think. Questions like, what keeps you up at night? If money wasn't an obstacle, what would you fix first and why in your community? When you think about your community, what is the one issue that if you fixed it would transform the neighborhood for the better? You know, things like, you know, at this moment, you know, in COVID, what are you most concerned about for your children? Questions like that, that really aren't just superficial, but are actually going beneath the surface and really, you know, getting to the heart of what makes people tick, right? What makes them think? What keeps them up at night? What do they wake up early in the morning wrestling with? What are their souls wrestling with when they get going in the day? And so we're going to do a fishbowl now with Reverend Silver and myself. Reverend Silver, are you out there? There we go. And I think we're going to pin us so we can, I'm going to pin Reverend Silver with me. Here we go, pin. And let's see if we can do a side to side. My pin too. I am.
Do I need to remove your spotlight in order to do that?
No, I did. Can you see? Is this two of us now? Or are you still seeing everybody?
Just seeing you.
Still just seeing you, but
You're the only one spotlighted.
I'm going to remove your spotlight and then maybe you do it that way.
Okay. So a couple of things while we're trying to get the tech stuff together and doing this is that, so, you know, one-to-one doesn't begin when the conversation, the one-to-one actually begins in before the conversation occurs, right? When you're setting up the meeting and you're calling somebody and you're saying, hey, hey, how you doing? You know, this is Dwayne. I'll practice like I was doing with Reverend Silver. Hi, Reverend Silver. This is Dwayne Royster. I was referred to you by Reverend Lindsay Franklin, who said I should talk to you about the Justice Witness Action Network for the Central Atlantic Conference. I'm hoping you can find about 30, 45 minutes for me to get together with you. Can we set a date and time to do that?
Sure, let's do that.
All right. Why don't we meet at 8 o'clock on November 5th? Does that work?
That works great.
All right, great. I'll see you, 8 o'clock on November 5th. And so it's now 8:03 on November 5th. And so
I was here on time. I think you were.
I was late. I apologize for being late, Reverend. I apologize. So Reverend Silver, thank you for taking some time to have a conversation with me today. I really, really appreciate it. And like I said, I was talking with Reverend Franklin about the Justice and Witness Action Network and the work she's leading in Potomac Association. And she said, I absolutely had to talk to you. And so I don't really know you well. So I just want to kind of build out a relationship, get to know you a little bit, and imagine if there's some possibility for us to do some work together. Does that sound all right?
Yes, that sounds great. Let's have that conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the time. And I saw you saying little ones. There must be some little ones around there. So do you have children and
Oh, yes, indeed. Indeed. I got 3 little ones that keeps my energy level going and going and going.
I got you. Well, good. I'm not going to keep you long, man, because I don't want to honor the time. I know it's late on a Friday, and the little ones probably going to bed shortly. So, Rev, I've been hearing about the Justice Witness Action Network, and I do faith-based organizing where we bring communities of faith together to work on addressing common issues about shared concern. And I'm really curious to hear more about your journey and about your ministry. And, really what I want to know is like, what keeps you up at night? What makes you tick? I mean, I think right now for me, I'm wrestling with the threats that are coming against our kids, especially around school and what they're being taught in schools and what they're trying not to be taught in schools. And so I know that bothers me, but I'm sure when you're thinking about it, what actually keeps you up at night?
That's a good question, Bishop. I think for me, there's a number of things. Of course, I don't think I can really single out one, but if there was an immediate one, I probably could name it, and I'll come back to that. What has kept me up at night in this position and trying to live into this purpose that I've been given to serve as Associate Conference Ministers working for Justice Witness Ministries is the lack of acknowledgement by both our pastors, our people, and the churches that we are powerful and that we can be powerful if we get out of the institutional culture of autonomy and embrace covenant to the degree in which we're greater than who we are, disconnected and isolated from one another. And I lovingly like to say that, we need to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. And we can do that if we don't allow, again, institutional cultural autonomy to overtake the reality that if we're in a covenant relationship with one another, then we can be as powerful beyond our imagination. If I was to say there was one thing, and this is very political, I would lovingly like to see that there was no such thing as a filibuster in the U.S. Senate right now, because there would be some immediate impact that could happen around a whole host of issues that I believe many of us are concerned about. I would also say that the other thing that's keeping me up at night is that, yes, you have some moderate Democratic leaders in the Senate as well as the House who are so indifferent to the needs of the people in their own district, let alone people across the country, but in their own district, that they're willing to allow them suffer at the expense of being beholden to money interests, corporate interests, and white supremacy.
Wow.
Those 2 things, or 3 things. I think it was 3 points.
Just small stuff there, just small stuff. I'm just curious, like when you think about those issues that are keeping you up at night, right? Let's bring it down to you. How does that impact your family, right? What is it that, drives you to want to see those things? How does that impact your wife, your kids, your family? What's that like?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my wife would like me to go to bed at night instead of watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or the other political things that I love to watch since I'm a political geek. But, the fact that we made a huge financial investment into our future, And the fact that we're still paying for student loans for education that we felt was desperately needed, and was told that this is the pathway towards, success and sort of living your best, living into your purpose. And we are shackled with not only 2 college degrees, but also a postgraduate degree. And the fact that we now have 3 little ones, instant family 2 years ago. And now we're in the process of thinking through, okay, what steps do we really need to take to make sure that they're not in a similar financial situation as they get to college age?
Yeah, I'm still paying student loans from 3 degrees, and we'll be probably paying them till I'm retired. I know that pain. I know that struggle. So let me just ask you, like, what does? So I mean, you don't want your children to have to have all the student loan debt, carrying that, and trying to carry a mortgage, because my student loan debt is almost equivalent to my payment is almost equivalent to a mortgage payment. And that's hard, right? Because that prevents me from doing other things that I want to do, like taking vacations I want, or hang out and do things that I want to do, to splurge on some things, because I'm paying that big payment every month. But I'm like, what would, if the administration, for example, got rid of student loan debt, how would your life be different?
It would be, I would be able to make some investments in causes that at a much greater level than I am right now, that I really believe in. I would have the opportunity to really embrace what we call Sabbath as ministers, and not try to do that on the whim here and there. I'll be able to invest a little bit more in retirement, so that I could retire and feel that I'm comfortable in that space and not have to continue to work beyond so-called working years. I have the opportunity to invest into some family members and friends who have, dreams for their lives that otherwise they would not be able to probably get the type of financial support from any financial institution or any other institution in this country because they're Black, they're young, and they want to have a small business. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking about this, and I know that there are other people that are out there that actually are having similar experiences. And, I know that this actually has a deep impact on communities of color, right? The student loan debt versus the income ratio is really, astronomical. There were promises made about student loan debt being relieved that hasn't been moved. And, we're thinking about trying to get some folk together to see what we could do to help move that along. One, I'm just curious if you'd be interested in having another conversation about this. And then 2, could you give me the names of like 2 or 3 other people you think that I could talk to about this that would actually be interested in this as well?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Not just that issue, but a whole host of issues that I'm concerned about. But of course, that one just sort of rises to the top of mind at this particular time. Definitely, most definitely.
Great. Well, thanks, Rev. I really appreciate your time. And if I can get that list from you, I would love if you could maybe even just do an email introduction. So they'll feel like, I'm not just cold calling out of the wilderness, but there's somebody that actually is kind of doing a warm handoff for me.
Exactly. Yep. I can get that done in the next 10 minutes.
All right, great, Rev. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, I wanted to stop share right there and just get some reactions or comments that you may have to that role play. For some of you, you may have been at that session a little over November of 2020. Let's get your reactions to that session. What did you hear? What did you see in terms of effectiveness of conducting a one-on-one? Feel free to unmute yourself and state your name and share your comment.
Bella Winters. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. This is Irma Barron, and I'm glad you played that over again because I did see it before, but after working with the Justice and Witness Action Network, for a while. I see the relevance of it, and I also see some opportunities to use that. When I first saw it, and there may be people on here who are seeing it for the first time, maybe some follow-up role playing.
Great, thank you for your comment, Irma. Mhm. Bella, you had a comment?
Yes, Bella Winters. What I saw was the longer you begin to kind of open up, the more that was revealed, the more you found commonality. And I think that is one of the key foundations in beginning conversations on one-on-one. And I thought your play that did that very well, because as the longer you talk, the more you realize you had a lot in common.
Exactly. Brother Keith, and then I have Diane has her hand up, so we go in that order.
This is my first time experiencing that, and to have the church to encourage that one-on-one, to build an organization. I think that's very powerful. I'm looking forward to getting to know people on that one-on-one level. As far as UCC, I'm from New York, and I've been doing advocacy work for many years. I did around HIV and AIDS. And dealing with the homeless and different organizations around that. But I never sit down and ask somebody, what do you have? And what can I offer you? That's a big new day for me. I'm looking forward to it, man.
Great. Thanks for your comments. Diane, and then we have Vivian who has her hand up.
Yes, this is Diane Kern here. Yes, I was very impressed. This is my first time observing the role play, and I think the two of you did a beautiful job of demonstrating the ability to connect, and the ability in psychology we talk about vulnerability in creating intimacy, emotional intimacy. So basically, we are much more likely to feel a sense of closeness, a sense of safety with each other. You create safety with each other, actually, when you recognize your common humanity. So, all those things that people have already said about, the commonalities that you discover, your ability to relate to each other, and then, what are mutual concerns, and we really tap into each other's humanity that way. So, I thought that, thank you for demonstrating that.
Thank you for being here this evening. Yes, Vivian, and then there's a few comments in the chat from two individuals.
Yes, well, this is a repeat for me, and it's really good to have the opportunity to see it again. I think, kind of as Irma was saying, each time there's another aha that comes through. So part of what I was noticing, though, was as the conversation progressed, it moved to a level that was very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Very specific, and then beyond that, it was moving toward getting some commitment for follow-up action that was related to that very personal, very important issue. And not only that, some way of expanding the pool of people who may be involved. So it went from hello, how are you, to now we have one more person and maybe more engaged in this issue. And very smooth.
Indeed. Any other comments before we have an opportunity to engage in some role play tonight? I want to break you out into small groups so that you can have an opportunity to do that. Sarah, go ahead and unmute yourself. Your hand is up.
I just liked that at the end, he asked if there were others that you knew in your network who were struggling with the same thing. And for the warm handoff, I thought that was really effective in terms of continuing to build the network and continuing to grow the power of folks and finding common connection. So I thought that was a really effective strategy as a way to end.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, many of us don't even realize that we already engage in one-on-ones in a lot of ways, but our attentions may be, you know, a little bit different. But I know for many clergy who would start a role as a pastor, you know, that's one of the first things that they, you know, would do or would be important for them to do in order to try to get to know as many people as possible within the life of that local church. And you know, that skill set is critically important for a number of relationships, a number of areas of work that you are engaged in, and for our work as the church and trying to build this justice movement beyond the 675 justice leaders and clergy who are on our list. We have to deepen the relationship amongst ourselves, of course. So the one-on-ones that we do with one another are important, but also the work that we would hope to do within our own local churches. And it helps to even build a church, just to strengthen relationships and find common ground. Daryl, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that from what I know about this model, what I like about it is that what Bishop Royster gave us was a formula. There's a formula to the conversation. And the last part of asking about other people you know is intentionally at that part of the conversation and not somewhere mixed in. Like you don't, you know, get really excited you're having a conversation. Oh, I wonder if you know some more people, you know, like, and carry on. There's like the process that he went through. And if we review that more at some point, there's a formula. It's a formula and it's a process to especially because the concept is engaging people that we may not know well, but it is helpful for people that we do know, because we know lots of people because we see them all the time, but we don't always know them in terms of what these issues are and what they mean to them. So it gives us a chance to deepen, as you've already said, that relationship. But if we follow the format, it allows us to yield more fruit.
Exactly my response to your comments, Daryl. And before anyone asks, we're going to try our best to get that recording edited, to edit out just that training portion of the one-on-ones, and of course, make it available to each of you so that you can continue to study it, use it for yourself in the context of the work that you're doing in your local church, and it's part of the network as well. What I want to do is 6:59 and we're on schedule. So I would like for us to go into breakout rooms. We have a sizable audience this evening, a community here of 44 individuals. So I'm going to try to create maybe 10 breakout rooms, or maybe that'll get us in groups of 3 or 4, maybe a little bit more on some, and see if we can get 2 individuals to in that group to do a role play of a one-on-one. Have someone do the initiating of the setting up the meeting and someone to play the other role, meeting with the other person. So I would encourage you to take time to do that, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes, see if anybody wants to report out, and then take a break. All right, let me create these rooms here. And I'm going to open all the rooms now. So all right, I think everybody is back. Why don't we hear from a few of you? How was that experience, having watched the training video and got a greater sense of purpose around the one-on-ones? How did that work for you? How did that feel? Anybody want to share?
Reverend Marvin, I'm just going to jump right in. I love Jeffrey Beekman and Jean Willock. And I'm gonna save you, Jean. I'm gonna save you, Jean. Okay. Indulging in the conversation, Jeffrey was the one that did the asking of the questions, and I provided the responses. But I want to say that just in this moment, given that I'm retired from 43 years of service, working with the individuals with disabilities population and being the compliance officer for New York City Youth Programs, I already know that I need the contact info for both Jeffrey and Jean to move forward with my future plans. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get contact information for everybody that is participating on here, because I literally sat here and wrote everybody's name down and tried to catch the church they were from, and I'm going to look them up. But it was wonderful. The only thing I want to say, and I didn't make the comment before when you asked, was that this can become, depending upon your size of your congregation, this can become time consuming. And would need to be tailored so that no one is felt overwhelmed with regard to time, because we are so busy in society. But I enjoyed the conversation. This was a wake-up call to kind of give some more clarity to what I'm looking to do for 2024. Great people, Jeffrey and Jean. Great people.
Well, you speak for me too, Denise. Well said.
Praise God. Any other comments, reactions on how that went for you, if you were one of the role players, or anyone who wants to share how the role play went that they witnessed? Laura, you have your hand up. Go.
Yeah, I was a witness, but I want to give a shout out to the question, what keeps you up at night? It was a great springboard to an invaluable conversation between Kirsten Schrom Rhodes, and I think it was Suzanne Schmidt. Was that you, Suzanne? They have a connection, even though Suzanne doesn't at this time attend Kirsten's church, and Suzanne has an issue she's really interested in, which is turning in guns and getting using them for useful farm implements, and the two of them immediately got into an extremely useful conversation about how Suzanne could further that program. So I thought it was a good way to start the conversation.
Agreed.
Great. All right, we are at 7:15. We are on time, and I would like to give you a break. So let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 7:25, and then we will hear from several of our issue-based networks and close out our evening. Does that sound good? 10 minutes, 10 minutes. All right, welcome back everyone from the break. We're going to spend our next few minutes hearing from several of our issue-based networks of our network. According to our agenda, we're going to hear from our Racial Justice Network first, then we'll hear from our Palestine-Israel Network, and then our Environmental Climate Justice Network, and then I'll speak briefly to ways in which we could move forward on organizing any new issue-based networks around issue passions that we have across our network. Let me see, is Reverend Daryl Moak back from his break yet?
I am here.
Okay, sir, if you will allow me, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can begin with that portion, and I'll back you up.
All right, thank you.
Right.
So as many of you will probably are aware, we've had an ongoing relationship with this white supremacy free zone confronting white supremacy project. Began with as a resolution in Potomac Association, it went to the CAC, and then ultimately went to the national, where it was adopted this year at Senate. And in what we crafted was not just a regular resolution to sit on the shelf, as many do, but in the resolution was action embedded in it. So when the national adopted it, they adopted the action that we're inviting people to do. And so you can learn more about that. The actual resolution is here. It's on our page. If you go to letjustice.org, you will be able to find all of this. This is our page, our work, and in the Central Atlantic Conference and all of our combined associations and our networks. This is ours. And so you'll be able to find this work here. The approved resolution for General Senate is there. Makes some changes to what was adopted along the way, but both CAC and Potomac agreed to the adaptation along the way. There is an intentional study guide and an action preview that we created that has also a video that introduces this work to folks that we were able to share at National there are some talking points that we had to, especially if you're talking within your congregations or your communities about this work and how it might be beneficial to your ministry or to the work you're doing. There are some talking points there that we use at General Synod that may be helpful. And we found that it was really important to have a resource guide and a glossary of terms that are used inside of that guide, and a survey of the results from the pilot. We did a pilot last year with a couple of churches and folks from our region, and we're able to get some feedback on the actual tool that we created. You want to go to the we're doing the slides, right? Or is that tomorrow? Okay. So this is an invitation to UCC local churches to journey towards confronting white supremacy. It's about creating a white supremacy free zone in our local churches. This is a guide, an intentional study guide and action guide to challenge racism and white supremacy. So that you can see the design there is very interesting. Again, I just mentioned that this was a resolution that we sent over, and the resolution is calling for our local churches to predominantly the churches that are of European descent and other local churches to declare themselves communities and settings as white supremacy free zone, and that there's a public expression of that. This process takes us through some intentional study and learning and developing an action plan to really actualize this concept and this statement. It's more than hanging a banner up on the outside of the church or putting up a sign on your electric billboard or whatever. Every now and again, it's more than what you might do once in a while in a sermon or a service and designate a service for something. You can do all of those things as well, but this is a deeper dive into how we work on the issues of white supremacy from within our own congregations and within our own ministries. We invite people to start where they're at, and the resources in the guide are materials that are going to be available. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We started with, so let me give you a little bit of, I think we're going to talk a little bit about the history of how we got here. But this scripture, Saul was uttering threats with every breath and was eager to kill the Lord's followers. So he went to the high priest. He requested letters addressed to the synagogues in Damascus, asking their cooperation in the arrest of any followers of the way he found there. He wanted to bring them, both men and women, back to Jerusalem in chains. As he was approaching Damascus on this mission, a light from heaven suddenly shone down around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asks. And we think that this conversation and this moment that Saul has is a reckoning for our folks to deal with the idolatry of white supremacy and of racism, to really address what we are doing in response to that and why we allow this to continue in a way it persecutes the people of God. The next slide. So the guide is divided into different modules, and each of those modules are connected to something that's called the stages of change. Some of you in mental health and substance use arenas may be familiar with this concept. We use the same concept. We broke contemplation into 2 parts. So there are really 7 segments to this. And really, we're recognizing that churches, that members of our congregations and as a combined entity are going to be in different places along this journey. And so we're inviting people to get in where they are. We do encourage people to go through all the early stages. If they find them, they've been doing this work for a long time and they are in a advanced stage, we do want you to go back through some of the other stages to make sure everyone's on the same page. It involves creating an accountability group and all of that. Our contents in each segment looks something like this. And this is our overall sort of contents of the guide itself, with an introduction, some preface, glossary material, and all the stages in here. We define a lot of things to make sure we're all on the same page. So very much aligned with some other work that I'll mention in a moment that we're doing with our racial justice audit and other work that we do. These things, we've been in communication with each other across all of these works that we're doing to make sure we're in alignment with each other. We're not having different language for different things and confusing people, right? Next slide. And we are, this guide then takes us through a process. So in the coming weeks, you will probably, some of you and many of you will get an email asking you to consider being a facilitator for some of this work. And that's a whole nother conversation. But in the meanwhile, we'd like to invite you all that are here to take the pledge to commit to starting the journey of a white supremacy free zone and confronting white supremacy. So as our conference and our associations have chosen to become anti-racist, this is a part of that journey and a part of putting some work behind the statement. What does it mean to be anti-racist? It's not something you just woke up tomorrow and say, oh, now I'm anti-racist, right? It's a process and we are all dealing with it. For those of you that are BIPOC community members, we are still working to develop a companion piece to this work that will be for predominantly communities of color, congregations and people, because we have people mixed in with, of course, our larger churches that may be predominantly of European descent. But as our colleagues and our members and our churches change, we want to make sure that the folks that have been at the receiving end of white supremacy are able to live into that change with you. It's a process that we all have to go through, and understanding how the church, what we've become accustomed to, is making changes, and we all need to be able to move with that. So there's a pledge here that people can sign to say they're committed to this kind of work as well. It doesn't necessarily commit your church to anything specific yet, but there is a process where if your church is interested in doing that, you would reach out and follow up with us, and then we reach out to you and have a conversation about embarking on that journey.
All right, great. Thanks, Daryl. I wanted to jump in and just share a little bit about the anti-racist local church audit. So if you still can see the screen, as Daryl mentioned, back in 2018, leaders came together across the conference who were committed to the work of racial justice, and they really worked with me as part of us building this Justice and Witness Action network to ground everything we do through the lens of racial justice, and wanted to set the goal of having the conference to become anti-racist. And one of the best ways in which we could do that is by working with local churches to become anti-racist. So we were able to work well under the leadership Dr. Vivian Jackson and others who were part of a team to help revitalize a tool that had been sitting on the shelf in the conference for some time, which was called an anti-racist local church audit. That audit went through a process of review, of redevelopment, of piloting, and now it's being packaged up and being prepared for more full introduction to the Central Atlantic Conference. In fact, we are pleased that in 2023, we started the process of working more formally with our local churches around the audit, starting first with one local church, and that local church who said yes to starting the journey to become anti-racist was Rock Spring Congregational in Arlington, Virginia. So we have two racial justice facilitators in Reverend Ann Holmes and Reverend Jerry Hanbury. I believe he's here with us this evening, who are working with them on a year-long journey to do a self-study, a mirroring on who they are as a congregation, and to see how much racism and anti-racism is embedded in who they are as a local church. If you all still can see my screen, I want to just give you sort of a quick snapshot look at the cover page of the anti-racist local church audit guide cover. It's being finalized right now, and we have a companion piece with this, which is called the Anti-Racist Local Church Audit Survey Tool, where if your local church wants to begin this journey, they will go through using this resource and that survey tool. And the reason why we wanted to share these two resources tonight as part of our update to you is because, as Daryl mentioned, we're going to be moving forward to identify leaders who can be trained as facilitators around these two resources that we've discussed, so they could begin to work closely with our local churches who are interested in engaging this particular work. We envision and see the Journey resource, which Daryl discussed, as an entry point for local churches who are really needing to do the initial work of understanding what racism is, what white supremacy is, and to do that internal personal work of individuals within the local church. And the Anti-Racist Local Church Audit is a resource designed and developed for those congregations who have already done some of that work and sort of meet a level of readiness in order to move forward with a year-long process of self-examination on what it means to be an anti-racist local church. So we wanted to share that with you this evening, and to let you know that our focus this year is bringing these two resources to our local churches across the conference, as well as training facilitators who can work with our Racial Justice Network team to move these initiatives forward. So I want to see if there's maybe one or two questions, and then I want to turn it over to our next issue-based network for their presentation. Any questions for Daryl or I? Peggy, I see your finger.
When are these materials to be available? Is there a timeline?
Yes, so we want to start with training some facilitators, which we were hoping to do in the first quarter of this year, and then hopefully have do some outreach to a set number of congregations who we see as potentially ready to move forward with this work. We want to do a scale up process because our capacity is limited. So again, we try to build our capacity by training facilitators, and then to try to see if we can work with as many churches as possible. So they likely will be ready for congregations who are ready to take the journey in either one of these resources in the early spring, definitely after Easter. Easter this year is March 31st. Is there another question or comment? All right, well, staying with our time, I want to turn it over now to Maren Goodson and Ann Weisenborn. They are the co-leaders of our Palestine-Israel Network.
Thank you. I will be sharing screen.
Okay, you should have access
And right, and here we go. Okay, this is just so we can get started, and so I knew where we would be. But the context for our presentation and our current work is that this is a time of crisis in Gaza and for the Western churches. We are, you'll notice at the top, you see a logo for the Central Atlantic Conference PEN. We are a direct offshoot of the UCC Palestine-Israel Network. But let's go back to the context of this session and of our work. Perhaps many of you have seen the graphic of Christ in the Rubble. Nothing tells that's such a dramatic picture from the Christ Lutheran Church in Bethlehem is in Palestine. If you just see the PA, it's not Pennsylvania, it is Palestine. It's in the West Bank. It shows the quandary that the Western churches are in. The Christ child sits in the rubble of Gaza. And interestingly, the Bethesda UCC in Bethesda, Maryland, has set up a corresponding installation, which is equally dramatic. This is the night view of that installation. And it shows that some churches are responding with clarity and opposing the genocide, displacement, and destruction being funded by US dollars. That's what we're so concerned about. It's also important for us to remember that it's not just Gaza. The next slide shows from the river to the sea, Palestinians must be free. Now, from the river to the sea has different meanings. Some of it is negative, but from the Mediterranean Sea to the River Jordan, Palestinians are entitled to rights, to human rights. And so we have to go from the River of the Sea to the Central Atlantic Conference, and we've got to demand justice for the Palestinians. That's what we in the CACPEN have been trying to do. So let's talk about who we are. That was on the outline that Marvin gave us. We grew out of a meeting called by John Deckenbach, whom many of you will remember. We were trying to implement a General Synod resolution called A Call for the United Church of Christ to take action toward a just peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Central Atlantic was one of the sponsoring conferences for that, and the material was developed by the UCC Penn, and some people in the conference worked on it. I know I worked on it with some people from around the country. It was approved, but someone mentioned how frequently the resolutions are just words. This was the first of 3 major resolutions that on the Palestine-Israel issues that have come through the Synod, but implementation is always the hard thing. The way the CACPEN has been organized, we have not been until now part of the conference, but now we are a Justice and Witness Action Network initiative. We have to figure out exactly what that means and how we take full advantage of that, but we have had no budget. Anything that we've done with contributions from our members. We work with 2 Google groups or listservs. A steering committee meets monthly and decides what the PEN will do. There are 13 people on the list. 5 are very active, 3 are somewhat, and 5 are there for information purposes to keep an eye, so they know what we're up to. We have a general list now of 89 members. The steering committee, only 2 associations are represented on the steering committee. New Jersey, Chesapeake, and Catoctin are not there, so keep that in mind. We have a statement of purpose written by Ann Weissenborn, and so Ann, you've got the floor.
Please unmute yourself, Ann, so we can hear you.
I'm sorry. Together with the UCC Palestine Israel Network, UCC PEN, and other like-minded regional networks, the Central Atlantic Conference Palestine Israel Network, or CACPEN, has as its ultimate goal bringing God's peace and justice to the geographic area that has been known for centuries as the Holy Land and/or Palestine. Our goal as CACPEN is to work, to educate, to engage, and to encourage relevant and positive action by associated congregations and individual congregants within the conference, while seeking additional allies both within and outside the UCC. You can read the second paragraph for yourself, but please focus on those words that are in yellow: to educate, to engage, and to encourage actions, positive actions, and that all of which involves mobilization.
Thank you, Ann. Another thing that we do is we collaborate. We work pretty closely with UCC PEN, our parent organization. We try to introduce people to the work of global ministries, Churches for Middle East Peace, the UCC over in the side, Voices from the Holy Land film series. We were an early sponsor of that group, but sometimes this collaboration is just promoting and announcing their events. Sometimes it's more than that. The Virginia Coalition of Human Rights, 2 of our steering committee members participate in that group, which is a very strong group in Virginia. Several people in various UCC churches in Virginia participate. Some of our Westmorelanders participate. We've recently been able to establish contact with the Delawareans for Palestinian human rights, a very, very strong group. Their website is just remarkable. We'd like to model something after that. There's a group in Montgomery County, Peace Action Montgomery, that's developed a wonderful little video that shows, it's a teaching video. It's about 3 minutes, and it overlays the area of Montgomery County, Maryland with the area of Gaza and the corresponding population differences. And of course, we are beginning to collaborate with the Justice and Witness Area Action Networks. So what did we accomplish in 2023? Well, our Google group, which functions like a listserv, subscribers increased from 60 to 89. The posts to the Google group averaged 16 in November and December, and about 6 in preceding months. You know what activated that interest. The October 7th Hamas action, followed by the unyielding response by Israel. We also established ties with more allied groups. And we'll talk about exhibit tables.
Yes, we set up exhibit tables, basically providing information for people who were delegates to the Central Atlantic Conference and the Potomac Association annual meetings. And the materials that were of most interest to the delegates were the really very basic factual exhibits or pieces of paper handouts that came from reputable sources, because there's so much bias in so many on both. It's hard to know what is real. And we've emphasized especially a piece on Hamas and Gaza produced by the Library of Congress, the Congressional Research Service. We had another one about CACPIN itself that we wrote. And we put together a sources of information about Palestine and Palestinians that are all the many groups that work and with and for the interests of the Palestinians in that area. And you might be surprised to see how many there are. And these are all materials that we would be happy to make available, plus others, to people on this call, on this session tonight, or anyone else who think their congregation or their local or their regional group might be interested in urging people to become more informed and to use that information to attempt to have an influence on what's happening on Capitol Hill and in the White House.
Thank you. Another thing that some other accomplishments in 2023, we became a J1 initiative toward the end of the year. And clearly we're trying to figure out exactly what that's going to mean for us. But we did hold our first joint event on December 2nd, the crisis in Palestine, Israel. What can we do? Some of the things that were of our goals for 2024 are based on that meeting. A recording of it will be up, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We recently endorsed and are promoting the Emergency Summit for Gaza to be held in Chicago, Ceasefire, Saving Lives and Building Peace. That will be held in Chicago, but it will also be virtual for people who are interested. And some of our goals for 2024, you see that we want to educate, engage, encourage, and mobilize across the board. Based on what we learned at the annual meeting, there's a serious need to satisfy the Central Atlantic Conference people's demonstrated hunger for basic facts about Palestine, Israel. We'll be using J1's features to do that. We want to engage more congregation and congregants in specific actions to influence U.S. policy and behavior. We want to empower and encourage them to act boldly. We want to increase the subscriber participation in our Google group and initiate more group discussions. The posts, although the Google groups are set up to be discussion groups, we don't have much discussion. Someone posts something and just a few people are posting, and it's more just a one-way street. And we know that people need to talk. They need to express their concerns, ask questions. So we want to find a way to improve that. We would like to recruit some steering committee members from the 3 missing associations so that we have a voice across the conference. And based on the December 12th event, we want to encourage the UCC and Global Ministries staff to strengthen their social media presence and work to reduce the information gap between the national setting and the people in the pews. UCC and Global Ministries staff and our Washington office are doing some fine work on some of these issues, and they're very well informed. But those resources, we haven't, so far, there's not been a good method or good approach toward getting that information about those resources into the churches and into people's lives. So we want to work on that. And we will also work especially hard to find new ways to shape the issue, that it's not just us, it is the Western Church's responsibility to speak out boldly against the Gaza genocide, the ethnic cleansing. If all the Palestinians in Gaza end up in Egypt, as 2 members of Netanyahu's government are promoting ethnic cleansing, a very good example, a sad example of ethnic cleansing. And even now, almost 90% of the Gaza population has moved out of their community. On the displacement, some of the settlers are talking about returning to Gaza and the destruction. And I have something that I didn't mean to do here, but let me go back to that slide. The issue is not just in Gaza, throughout in Gaza, of course, and in the West Bank, and in areas in Israel proper. There is a continuous violation of human rights by the Israeli government. And we want to expose that and activate the Central Atlantic community in some methods to oppose that. We also want to take full advantage of this new status of being an initiative. We want to use the existing features. The previous group talked about that good use of the website. Some of the materials that Anne was talking about, we will make available on the website in the coming weeks and months. That mailing list and the staff and the organizing experience, because we have been, like I said, budgetless. We've done a good bit, I think, with the resources that we had. We also want to find some opportunities to collaborate with the people from the other initiatives. This is, when we talk about racial issues in the United States, there are racial issues in Israel and Palestine. This is, to a great extent, a racial thing, an ethnic thing. People are treated differently based on their ethnicity. And much of the support for that comes from US dollars. Then some of the immediate action items, we'd like to pick the brains of the people in at this retreat, best use of resources, find out what questions you have, what you need to know from us, how we can emphasize things for you. We will be heavily promoting the next weekend's 2 events, that coalition in Chicago, and there's a March on Washington for Gaza at 1 p.m. a week from tomorrow on the Mall. Delpher, the Delaware group, is organizing a group, and some people within within our local UCC are working on trying to find a means of getting together. I know some people from Westmoreland are talking about going. We're hoping that some of our young people can go. Emily Parker, who's in the group, and others are planning to go. We're in touch with some people from another church, and Mike Neuroth has offered his office as a meeting place. So if you sign up to join our mailing list, and I'll put this information on the chat tomorrow so that you're not overwhelmed today, you'll know about that organization. We want to, and then another is that we want to strategize on the best use of the relationship, particularly in the election year. 60 congressmen have have said, we need a ceasefire now. We need to make it 70, we need to make it 80. And once there is a ceasefire, we need to work harder to work with CMEP and their advocacy days to engage and insist that more members of Congress from the Central Atlantic area know that there are people out there. There are people of faith insisting that this is not the way we're going to treat people. We are not going to use the resources of this nation to abuse the human rights and treat these people so unjustly. We, on a specific note, we want to plan, promote, and host 3 education and engagement events from January through March, and mention the serious need for basic information. We need to find perhaps a workshop. We need to find the best way to do that and get more people informed so that they can be informed as they take these actions. And we'd like to recruit steering committee members from the Missing 3 Association so that our planning is not totally based on the Potomac Association. We are overrepresented, but we're close to the nation's capital. You can see how that would happen. Then the final thing that I want to do is go back to the beginning. We talked about Christ in the rubble. So I'm going to play this little video, is about less than 3 minutes. The speaker is Reverend Munte Isaac. He's a Lutheran. He's the pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem in the West Bank. You'll notice as he speaks, he pronounces Gaza differently. It's more like a hard H. That's a little disconcerting the first time you hear it. But Emily Parker, who is on the call, persuaded her sister-in-law to take snippets from Reverend Isaac's Christmas sermon called The Church, Christ in the Rubble, a Liturgy of Lament. So special thanks to Emily, and let's watch the sermon or snippets.
We are outraged by the complicity of the church. Let it be clear, friends. Silence is complicity. And empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action, all under the banner of complicity. So here is my message. Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October 7th, and the world was silent. Should we be surprised at their silence now? If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. And if we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace. Some have not even called for a ceasefire. I'm talking about churches. I feel sorry for you. We will be okay. Despite the immense blow we have endured, we, the Palestinians, will recover. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians. Although this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received in a long time, but we will be okay. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this? Your charity and your words of shock after the genocide won't make a difference. And I know these words of shocks are coming. And I know people will give generously for charity. but your words won't make a difference. Words of regret won't suffice for you. And let me say it, we will not accept your apology after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look at the mirror and ask, where was it
again tomorrow? I
was going through a genocide? We are outraged by the complicity of the church.
So, thank you very much. And as I said, tomorrow I'll put some items in the chat so that you'll have a record of them. So you can check some links and do some things yourself. So, over to you, Marvin.
Thank you, Maren. Thank you, Ann. Let's take one or two questions or comments so we can stay on time and not keep you past our agreed upon ending time. Bella, you have your hand up, go.
Yes, are you aware that Reverend Craig Peterson, the associate conference minister in the New Jersey area, is beginning a forum for the Israel-Palestine situation, and he's sort of asking people to become part of that forum. It's in its initial stage, but he's developing a whole forum surrounding the things that are going on in Palestine and in Israel.
Thank you for that, Bella. I'll get in touch with him.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we know that this is a controversial issue, and we know that there may be some in our pews that do not stand in full agreement with resolutions that have passed either in the Central Atlantic Conference or the United Church of Christ around our position on Palestinian human rights. So there's an opportunity for us to be in conversation and dialogue with those individuals within our local churches around who have a different position or different thinking around this particular issue. Craig, my colleague, Reverend Craig Peterson, your hand up. Go ahead and speak, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Bella had brought up. From a congregational perspective or development perspective, my passion is to really dig deep and ask, why is it that churches are not talking about these issues? And what I've found over the years is they don't talk because people often come from such a reactive place and they have no context for understanding how is it that their positions came to be formed. So the Bridge Builders Group is not about the policies per se. It is more about getting individuals in touch with their development. I was at a church that was very upset, for instance, about the United Church of Christ's Instagram posts on Palestine that were threatening to pull back. And in the course of the conversation, I just used one of the bridge builder techniques. They had shared their congregation's intimate connections with a synagogue and many of their family members or their church family members who were in interfaith relationship with those of Jewish descent. So I simply asked, I said, I'm curious about both the Palestinian presence as well as Muslim presence in the congregation. What has that been like? And there was silence. And as we held that space, it began to create space for people to understand not only what they believe, but why and where imbalances may occur. So I just wanted to kind of contextualize it and say it's a qualitatively different way of approaching this through the use of personal story to help pave the way for some of those important conversations like Maren was talking about.
Thank you, Craig, for your comment. And thank you for the work that you're doing on that important part of our collective ministry in the New Jersey Association. And we will be attempting to do more of that work this year as we get deeper into some of our campaigns, like our Faith and Democracy campaign, which we will talk more about tomorrow morning. I want to go ahead and move us along and spend a little bit of time talking about our next issue-based network. Give me a moment as I share my screen here. So we have an emerging issue-based network in environmental and climate justice. Back in 2022, we began to build relationships through through one of our local leaders in our church, Beloved Community UCC, in their justice leader, Robin Lewis, who has extensive knowledge and skills in justice work and environmental justice work, and particularly in this region of the Central Atlantic Conference. And that relationship led me to be in conversation with Professor Sakobi Wilson at the University of Maryland in College Park. Also, our National Environmental Justice Minister, Reverend Brooks Brent, also put me in touch with the same individual. And through conversations, one-on-ones, it led to us developing a partnership initiative, where over the last year and a half, we have been working to create an air quality monitoring network, which we have been titled the Mid-Atlantic Data Justice Collaborative. This was launched in 2022, again, with a workshop series that was open to the entire conference, and we had participation from the entire conference. And as part of this workshop series, we have been installing air quality monitors at local churches in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., and in Maryland, as a way of trying to collect important data on the air quality, how much carbon monoxide, PM2 matter is in the air, and how that impacts particularly communities of color. We've had a student, one of our own UCC students working with us, who's a student at Lancaster Seminary. His name was John Cassenter. He worked with us for an entire year to put this initiative together. And we currently have 29 local churches who are participating. It was our hope to extend this initiative into the state of New Jersey, but unfortunately our partners did not have enough capacity with other organizations in New Jersey in order to invite our New Jersey local churches to be a part of this initiative. Our goal is to get to 50 local churches with air quality monitors installed. So we're working with Interfaith Power and Light to identify 20 additional churches through their relationships, their network across the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And our hope is that by the spring of this year, we will reach that 50 mark and then take a step back and see if we can extend this initiative further across the Mid-Atlantic, which is the Central Atlantic Conference. So we have been excited about the participation of these churches, their engagement, and we're hoping that we can build relationships amongst the leaders who have engaged their churches in this initiative to see if there are other issues that we could begin to work on, both by our state and regional work, but also as an issue-based network. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of this work. And this is the website, our website, where this work is highlighted. So you can go there and find more information. One of the things we also want to do moving forward is try to find opportunities to build new issue-based networks. Some of that work actually is already happening in the context of congregational development work that my colleague, Reverend Craig Peterson, is doing. And he has pulled together leaders from different areas of the conference to try to start the process of establishing a formal LGBTQAI+ network, because we have a significant number of open and affirming congregations across the entire conference. So he's beginning to have some initial conversations with a few leaders around what does it look like for our churches to be open and affirming, and how does that fit into the work of congregational development. So as that work begins to move forward and bubble up, we were also going to be engaging those same leaders in conversation around what does it look like to do that work from a justice standpoint. Because we want our churches to do more than just celebrate Pride or participate in a local Pride month. We want them to engage in some really concrete action based upon how we are approaching the work of justice across this entire region. So one of the questions we asked you tonight was to see what was one of your passionate, one justice issue that you was very passionate about. And as I look through the chat here, I see that a number of people have listed theirs. And I see that there may be an opportunity for us to explore what it would mean for us to build some more issue-based networks. So we don't have any really hard, fast rules as of yet as a network in terms of how those things should get started. But what we would like to do is see if there are a number of leaders who are interested in those issues and see what is their level of energy and capacity to be able to come together and sort of build a more larger network around that particular issue and begin to formally bring UCC leaders, clergy, and congregations together to do work around a set of priorities of that issue. So if you're interested in exploring what it would look like to build a new issue-based network of the Justice and Witness Action Network, just reach out to me. You can email me at justiceaction@cacucc.org, justiceaction@cacucc.org, and to let me know if you're interested in that, and I can start the process of talking with you and seeing how we can do that together. So that's what we wanted to share with you tonight in terms of our issue-based networks. So let me just stop right here and just see if there's any other questions or comments around the work that's happening through our issue-based networks.
I am probably the newest one on this group. And what I was hoping to walk away with today with regards to the Racial Justice Network, the Palestinian Israel Network, the Environmental and Climate Justice Network, was what exactly is being called for, I'm going to say, my church to do. For example, in terms of the Palestinian Israel Network right now, for me, I see that we can join the Emergency Summit, which is free, and then look at the information and move from there. It is very critical for us to know what the next step is in order to bring us closer to what you're looking for collectively.
Yes, thank you for your comments. I'm glad that you have taken something away from one of our issue-based networks. We will be following back up in regards to the Racial Justice Network. We will be following back up with everyone here participating tonight as well as tomorrow to let them know the next steps of our work around making those two resources available to our local churches. We're going to be starting initially by reaching out with two particular individuals who bring a certain skill set and meet a criteria around being a racial justice facilitator who can make these resources available to our local churches. So you all will be hearing more about that hopefully next week. Any other comments, questions in regards to our issue-based network? Wow, we're moving along quite well.
Marvin.
Okay.
I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. As each of these different networks were described, they certainly have overlapping concerns. Is there some effort or person or strategy to coordinate those overlapping issues, such as environmental issues affect communities of color, which would be a race issue? I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but.
No, you are. If you recall, a little bit earlier, I stated that everything we do as part of the Justice and Witness Action Network, we attempt to do through the lens of racial justice. That's just sort of a foundational principle and way in which we are operating. We have not had as much bandwidth because of our capacity to bring leaders together from each of our issue-based networks to discuss the intersectionality around these particular issues. I'm hoping that we can do that at some point. I think right now our energies are best served with building these individual networks as they are, and making sure that as we bump into each other, that we don't knock each other down in doing the work. So I've been sort of helping to play that role since I sort of know what's happening all over the place, and keeping them informed of what the others are doing. But since we are still a young justice movement, only 3.5 years old, and with very little staff capacity, but a lot of volunteer capacity, not a lot of financial dollars committed here. We're doing the best we can with what we have right now.
Thank you.
Emily, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for organizing this. It's been very helpful for me. I do want to ask Reverend Silverway, you pointed out that the Gaza-Israel situation is controversial. The way I see it, we are opposing a genocide of a people, and that shouldn't be controversial. There are people who there are congregations in the UCC that are not opening and affirming. Not everyone is on board with racial justice, but you haven't pointed that out. So I feel like that I just wondering why you did it, because the point of Marin's presentation is that we feel as Americans and as Christians who have so much responsibility for the harm that's being done, like we are obligated to do what is like within our power.
Sure. My comment was not a judgment against anyone's efforts or work. It was stating a knowledge that I had about conversations I had with my colleague, Reverend Craig Peterson, around some of the concerns that were raised about the UCC's position on Palestine and Israel. So I was aware of that, and having been engaged in this issue going as far back as 2015 when I joined the conference and had an opportunity to visit Palestine, Israel. I'm quite familiar with that, and I know how it raises much controversy in the life of the church. So it's not controversial for me, but it's controversial for those who don't agree with the positions that have come out of General Synod by the United Church of Christ. And that's the case also with racial justice and other issues. So I'm not making a statement of indifference to Palestine, human rights, and the work of Palestine Israel Network. I'm just stating what is the fact and what has been happening in our local churches around these particular issues.
And Marvin,
clarification.
Can I have a minute?
Sure.
I'm learning a great deal from this, and we've been very aware that there's a spectrum of people who are extremely well informed, and then people for whom a lot of these things are new, and we have to be able to work across the board. It's also important for people like me and others to recognize that there are people in the conference who are like the people that you referred to, for whom this is controversial, this is new, it might be even scary to them. They're afraid of losing the friendships of their Jewish neighbors. We have to find a way to make them comfortable without giving up on our basic principles. This is wrong. People are being killed in our name, and the Christian church must stand up. The Western church must recognize that it's happening and act accordingly, but in a way that won't frighten people, but without giving up on our principles, without compromising them. And that's tricky. That's tricky. I know that in 2015, the conference minister of Massachusetts stood up and said exactly the same thing. So, and this is an issue that's going to be there forever. We'll just have to find ways to work together cooperatively. And I look forward to getting in touch with you, Reverend Peterson. We'll find some way to find some ways we can work in other way and across that board, across that spectrum.
Yep. Thank you. So I'm glad he's here this evening so he can hear these voices.
You know, for me, it calls to mind the slide, Reverend Silver, that you showed us earlier of the circle with the 7 steps, right? And in some ways, I think there is a corollary between that and the work on racial justice, acknowledging that people are coming from different places, and the United Church of Christ in our conference has a stand, but that iterative circular process applies here as well.
That's a good point, Catherine. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, indeed. Mhm. Other comments or questions about our issue-based network work? Reverend Moak, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on this conversation, this exchange that's happening now, and find it to be quite invigorating and exciting that we are sharing our thoughts and our comments and finding ways to connect with each other on this particular issue. It makes me think that it would be great to have more opportunity to share our thoughts on all of the different Action Network activities and the issues that each one is having, even if it's not our Action Network or even if it's not our action. I just think there's so much enrichment that I feel we're getting right now, and would love more of these opportunities to just talk to each other about what we think and what we feel, and where we get chances. Some of us that get to pastor have the privilege of that, get to talk about it from the pulpit a little bit here and there when it's appropriate, but it's not a dialogue. That's something, usually it's an exchange, sometimes back and forth, but not often. So getting a chance to talk with people and hear our thoughts and the nuances of how we each feel about it and how it impacts us, I think is great. So I hope that the Action Networks themselves have more time to have conversation and not just the business of the committee or the work, but to really engage each other. So thank you, Marvin, for leading this, and for Reverend Peterson for your work as well. I just hope we can do more of this.
Indeed, absolutely. Absolutely.